maybe I did. Oh yeah, I did. I got it.
Henry's doing okay?
Yeah.
I thought he had an intern.
Hey, Dave. Okay. 7:30. Okay, we're going to get started for the Board of Finance, Town of Branford, regular meeting dated May 19th, 2025. First on the agenda is to approve minutes of the March 20th and 31st meetings.
I'll move that, Joe.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded by Pam.
Yep.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next is citizens' comments. And if there's anyone from the audience who'd like to address the board on agenda items, they're welcome to do it now. Tracy? I know you sent an email. Is this the context of
Yeah,
that?
I'm just going to read it.
Fine.
So, I apologize for not being more formal in my email. I realized it was a little too familiar. So I apologize, Mr. Chairman
It's okay.
and Board of Finance. At the annual budget meeting Tuesday, May 13th, the Branford Representative Town Meeting passed the following resolution. Whereas the Branford Representative Town Meeting understands Branford undesignated fund balance to be an estimated $47 million, and whereas the Branford taxpayers have already contributed to its substantial growth through prior taxation over the last 10 years, it is resolved the RTM respectfully requests that the Board of Finance zero out the increase to be raised by taxation by bringing forward more of the already banked fund balance. We recognize the ability of the Board of Finance to make further revenue adjustments prior to the setting of the mill rate, and hope you will take this into consideration on behalf of the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Ray.
Ray?
Sorry, this isn't actually an agenda item. I started in politics about 15 years ago, and I met a lady that was on this board, Lorraine Young, and she wanted to retire. And she had come to me and said she really wanted to have a woman in town come and replace her. And I had told her, I can't just tell who's going to replace you till after you resign. And she trusted me that we'd be looking for more women on this board. So with Evie back and everybody in the room, I just wanted to, I know how happy Lorraine must be right now with 3 women on this board, 3 women highly capable of doing this job. So I know Lorraine's smiling, I'm smiling, so thank you.
Thank you. Lorraine was a wonderful person and a great member of the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Other citizens under comments or additions under citizens' comments? Okay, if not, we'll move on to item number 3, which is to hear a presentation from Focus Partners, Michael, regarding the performance of the Town of Branford Police Pension Plan for the quarter ended March 31st, 2025, and if necessary, rebalance the portfolio. And then we'll move on to item number 4, 5, and 6, which will cover the other post-employment benefits, the volunteer fire incentive plan, and the coastal resiliency fund.
Great.
Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Good evening, all. So as for the new member of the board, nice to meet you, Yvette, and for everyone else who, of course, has seen me plenty of times over the years, we'll follow our usual agenda, starting with a brief overview of the markets and the economy, and then dig into performance, and then offer a rebalancing recommendation. So for this quarter, our acronym is TIDE. You can spell it a few different ways, but you could also call it DIET. But in terms of what we're going to be discussing, we're doing TIDE, T-I-E-D, starting with the T for tariffs, of course, which is high on everyone's mind. It's kind of interesting, sort of tongue-in-cheek, but the president seems to have single-handedly reintroduced the word tariff to the English language, and it's something that we're all talking about about sort of day in and day out. But I've heard a lot of different analogies. One of the more extreme is the president lights a bomb and drops it and tries to catch it before it hits the ground. But something a little more middle of the road is the cycle of announcement, retaliation, escalation, and negotiation. And in a lot of ways, we're in the negotiation portion of that. Now, you may agree or disagree with the method, but the overall theme is that the tariffs are being used as both a political and economic tool to try and renegotiate some of the trade agreements that in many cases are decades old and were derived at a time when the U.S. was actively trying to prop up certain emerging nations that arguably are no longer emerging nations. So. But the lesson is that we'll, in all likelihood, continue to see volatility coming from this. Everyone's sort of breathed a sigh of relief over the past couple of weeks, but it's important to remember things are just sort of on hold, if you will, and negotiations and headline risk will continue. The I is for inflation. Inflation continues to move in the right direction. Just last week, we had a couple of inflation numbers that came in a little bit better than expected. However, in 2024, inflation continued to be driven by two key areas, and those were housing and auto insurance, and we don't anticipate either of those to come down dramatically anytime soon. So we anticipate sort of that last mile of inflation back to the 2% mark will certainly be tougher than than kind of the first move down, and tariff uncertainty certainly has added to that. So anticipate continued volatility both in the markets as well as the inflation numbers. The E is for an old market saying, but I think it's pretty adept. And that is the market takes an escalator up and an elevator down, and we certainly kind of experienced that in April and into May. Although it feels, if you're a Disney fan, it kind of feels a little more like Tower of Terror over the past couple of weeks. But kind of interesting that we have actually seen from the bottom that the S&P has rallied close to 20%. So it's really just a reminder that if you invest by the headlines, kind of at best you're investing based on yesterday's news, and it's very difficult to predict. And while if you sold out on April 4th or 5th or whenever it was that the market sort of bottomed, it felt really good for a little while. But as we can see now, we've missed out on you would have missed out on a 20% run in just about 6 weeks. And so that brings us back to diversification, which of course is the tool to manage volatility, and continues to. Although there was a lot of talk over the past couple of years, does diversification still work with the so-called Mag 7 stocks? We really have seen diversification working over the past number of quarters, and we'll see that when we look at the performance report as non-U.S. equities have been kind of the star performer thus far year to date. Okay. So with that, I'll turn on to the report, please, starting on tab 2, page 15, and we can start with the police pension. At 35,000 feet, the return since inception of 4/1/03 at 5.62, really right on target with a couple basis points behind the policy return at 5.69%. That's come with about 7% less volatility as defined by the portfolio beta, and so therefore we have a positive alpha or value added of 2 basis points. It seems like a low number, and it is quite frankly a low number, but that's what we strive for in terms of for 2 reasons. One, because of course diversification means that we own sort of the winners and the losers, and so at the portfolio level that tends to compress the alpha. But of course the town of Branford pension plan, the police pension plan in particular, is much more conservatively invested. The equities are in index funds, and then the fixed income is matched towards the liability, and so consequently we don't have an expectation of significant outperformance. So performance has really been consistent with what we would expect. In dollars and cents, back on 4/1/03, we had $8.31 million. Since that time, there's been net outflows of $1.5 million and investment earnings of $23.8 million, bringing us to the ending value as of 3/31 of $30,581,000. If everyone would be so kind to look at the police pension sheet that I passed out, these are values as of Thursday's close. You can see, along with the market that has recovered dramatically since the beginning of April, or when we started to go down a little bit in late March, combined with the added contribution, and the market value as of Thursday's close was $36,677,000, of which just under $2.1 million is invested in a T-bill. That T-bill is basically waiting for the actuarial valuation, which should be completed this fall, and that's kind of the second piece, or the remaining piece to that additional funding or additional deposit that was made, because we want to get a good feel for the liability so we can sort of match that up. But we did invest a majority of the contribution in fixed income, under the premise that we won't be reducing the fixed income allocation. So let's buy in and get those fixed income dollars working right away. If you focus in on the three colored rows, you'll see that we are overweight to bonds. We're at 56.5% versus a target of 52%, but a little bit underweight to cash at 1.77 versus 3%, and then a concurrent underweight to equities. We do not recommend rebalancing the portfolio at this point. We've had kind of a nice snapback rally in equities, but we just deployed a fair amount of dollars in bonds, and like to continue to use the liability matching strategy. So even though we're a little bit overweight in fixed income, we have sufficient cash to get us through benefit payments through the end of the fiscal year, and then we have the other $2.1 million that will be invested in the fall, in addition to the regular annual contribution that will come in July. So no changes recommended for the police pension at this juncture.
Thanks, Mike. Questions on this pension? Police pension?
Okay,
all right,
great. So moving on to tab 3, page 33 of your report. This is the OPEB Trust. The OPEB Trust, a similar experience to the pension, return consistent with, slightly behind the benchmark since inception, owing to two things. One, the historically more conservative approach with running with excess cash, combined with the relatively, although we're at 14 years now, but compared to the pension, the relatively short history of the OPEB Trust. And so we've averaged 5.12% since 2011, July of 2011, and that's come with about 12% less volatility than the benchmark, as defined by the portfolio beta. So again, the portfolio alpha slightly positive at 0.04. In dollars and cents, the initial deposit to the OPEB was just over $4,030,000 on July 1st of 2011. Additional positive cash flows since that time, $23.25 million, and net investment earnings of just under $13 million at $12.913 million, bringing us to the ending value of $40,211,000 as of the end of the quarter. A slight decline in value of the OPEB since the end of the quarter, owing primarily to slightly higher interest rates, has put a little bit of downward pressure on bonds, and we are so our current value is at $39,746,000. As you can see from the spreadsheet, we're slightly underweight to fixed income, slightly overweight to equities. However, in conjunction with my conversations with the finance director, we've concluded that we'd like to recommend rebalancing the OPEB, just kind of consistent with the long-term trend. We've had a nice snapback rally in the equities. If you look at the second column from the right, you'll see that anything in red is where we're overweight, so that's what we would be selling, and anything in black is where we're underweight, so that's what we would be essentially what we would be buying. So we want to replenish the cash for the OPEB, because of course there's monthly withdrawals coming out of that now, and then it's an opportunity to deploy about $772,000 into fixed income and take advantage of that spike in rates we've seen over the past 6 weeks or so. So recommendation for this quarter is to do a full rebalance for the OPEB trust, please.
Thanks, Mike. Questions on Michael's presentation on the OPEB? Somebody want to move this rebalance?
So moved. I'll second it.
Moved by Harry, seconded by Jeff. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. So moving on to tab 4, the volunteer fire incentive plan. Very similar asset allocation to the pension, to the police pension. So similar experience, although because of the relative size, we're using a bond index as opposed to a liability matched bond portfolio. But we have seen annualized returns at 5.78%, going back to 12/1/15 when the fire pension was separated from the police pension, and that's come with about 6% less volatility, so our alpha there is really flat or at 0. In other words, our risk-adjusted return is exactly as we would expect based on the performance and the degree of volatility of the overall portfolio. In dollars and cents, the fire pension was first funded with just under $56,000, and then additional cash flows that originally came from the combined pension of $1,089,000 and earnings of $665,000, bringing us to $1,811,000 as of the end of March. Since the end of March, a modest amount of appreciation, and the value is, as of Thursday, stands at $1,840,000. Again, looking at the spreadsheet that I handed out just before the meeting, if we focus in on the colored lines, we're really right on target with the asset allocation, or the target asset allocation, and also right on target with our cash allocation to meet benefit payments. So much like the police pension, although for slightly different reasons, no recommendation to rebalance this evening.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Questions on this presentation? Okay.
Okay, and then lastly, tab 5, please, page 63. We'll review the Coastal Resiliency Fund. The Coastal Resiliency Fund, of course, its asset allocation is restricted by Connecticut state statutes. It's heavily invested in fixed income, more so than the other plans. Currently, the target is at 65% in fixed income, and so on page 63, we've had an annualized return of 2.31% since the dollars were first invested in October of 2021. That's come with about 10% less volatility, so we have a slight positive alpha at 0.05. In dollars and cents, at the bottom right of 21, total initial deposit of $1,925,000. An additional $826,000 has been deposited and $245,000 earned, bringing us to $2,996,000 at the end of March. Since the end of March, slight appreciation. We're at $3,032,000 as of Thursday's close, and again, right on target with the asset allocation within 1% of our targets. So we don't recommend rebalancing. However, in my discussions with the finance director, he had indicated that there is still a contribution that needs to be made to the CRF before the end of the fiscal year. So just wanted to notify the Board of Finance and seek your approval to deploy those dollars when the finance director deposits them.
Sure. Jim, what's the amount of that?
The amount that he's referring to is coming in. That would be the $750,000.
Got you. Oh, you got
that was
it.
approved a month back.
Yep. Okay.
I'll move it.
Moved by Harry.
I'll second.
Second by Yvette. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
So unless there are any questions, that concludes my prepared remarks.
I think we're good. Any questions, board members? No, we're good. So thank you, Mike. Very good presentation. Appreciate
Thank you all.
it. As usual.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks,
we'll
Mike.
see you later in the summer. Take care.
Yes. Okay, next up is item number 7. To consider and, if appropriate, approve a transfer request from Inland Wetlands Director to approve a transfer request for fiscal 25 from overtime 250 to longevity 250.
Yeah,
You covering that, Jim?
Yes. Yeah, I spoke to the Inland Wetland Director today. I mean, it pretty much follows in what's in her letter. Basically, she's been here 10 years, so she's entitled to a longevity change, and she had enough money in her overtime, and looking at where she was going for the rest of the year, she felt that the overtime was sufficient to cover it. It's all within her budget.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Questions? There's a letter from Jamie Frederick. Moved by Harry. Second by Jeff. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item number 8 is to consider and, if appropriate, approve transfer request from Willoughby Wallace Memorial Library for fiscal 25 from contingency $14,000, transferring into library staff $13,000, and into communications of $1,000. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Good to see you again so soon after our last
Just
meeting.
ask Jim a quick question.
Yeah.
What's the answer?
Okay. All right, so basically, I left it on my desk, but I do remember running it. So it's approximately $471,000 will be left in contingency.
That's it?
After this transfer.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a lot.
Okay.
Well, there's going to be a lot of transfers to cover a lot of utility accounts on electricity, too.
Sure,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Okay, so I did send a memo out that when I came last month, we had changed our staffing. So at that time, I kind of hinted that we may run out and I may be back, so here I am. We are short about $13,000 to finish up the fiscal year. I ran the numbers this afternoon. We've got about $2,200 left in library staff. That will get me maybe one pay period, so we do need to move the money from contingency to cover the rest of this.
And this is primarily because you changed the staffing level for security and
Correct.
safety reasons. So
Correct.
you have 2 people on at all times
Yes.
down there, and other things that are included in her memo. So,
And then there's a tiny amount for communications. When I came the first time back in the fall to meet everybody, we were switching some of the IT things around, and at that time, there was a phone bill. However, we weren't getting the bills. They were being sent to another department, and I didn't find them until last month. So
should have sent them to the selectmen.
that's okay. So we just wanted to have that covered
All right,
also.
so the request is there for $14,000. So you got questions? Moved by Pam.
I'll second.
Second by Deborah. Is there discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you very much.
Item number 9, pursuant to Section 42-1 of the Code of the Town of Branford, the Sustainability and Compliance Manager requests a Board of Finance review and favorable opinion for a bid waiver on a 3-year contract with 2-year optional 1-year extensions to Brookstone LLC for the Thimble Island Refuse and Recycling Collection. Welcome, Tyler. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Tyler Brown, Sustainability and Compliance Manager. So the bid went out in March of this year, and results came in the beginning of April. We received 3 bids. One was significantly lower than the other 3. So we spoke with that bidder, and that bidder basically insinuated that they underbid, and they withdrew their bid. We then moved on to the next lowest bidder, who provided their insurance certificate and the amount of insurance that they were essentially willing to provide for this contract. It was significantly lower than we asked for originally, So we moved on and evaluated the next bid, which was from Brookstone. In Brookstone, which I believe you all have, you'll see that it was an alternative bid was provided at a lower than asked for insurance policy, but a higher than provided by that previous low bidder. So we are asking to accept and move forward with the contract for the alternative bid, which would be a 3-year and 2 extension year period, and that would be a $77,700 for the 3 base year periods, and the 2 extensions would then be $28,490, and that's what we feel is best.
And this has been approved by the Board of Selectmen?
Yes.
Okay.
Pending
And-
your review.
What's that, Jamie?
Pending your review. The Board of
Okay.
Selectmen knew it was getting
Pending your
ahead,
review.
but they said, yeah,
And-
pending
and
the
this past-
favorable review of the Board.
Yes. And this passed muster with legal counsel? Could be town council?
As far as the selection going through the,
Yeah, and the process and also the contract?
the contract is, it was a previous contract that we've had
That's our
before. So
standard
it was not reviewed again. But as far as the process we followed for the selection, it did meet, it meets our code.
Got it. Questions on this from the board?
Yes. Tyler, would you just tell us again what the issue is with the insurance, please?
Sure. So on the bid, we asked for an insurance policy that had a $2 million aggregate and a $2 million $2 million general aggregate and a $2 million umbrella policy. And we received an alternative bid from Brookstone to have that be a $1 million aggregate and umbrella policy.
And the Board of Selectmen did accept that lower insurance amount?
Yes. I think this carryover, a lot of this language, I think, was, and the requirements were also, the Solid Waste Commission carried this over from other contracts that we have. So in comparison, this is a $25,000, roughly $27,000 a year contract.
Yeah, 25.9, you were right.
So in comparison to our curbside collection contract, which has those requirements, is close to a $2 million?
Yeah, the umbrella and the aggregate is $2 million.
No, I'm saying the value of the contract.
Oh, the value of the contract, yes.
We're trying to up the level of insurance that's required. However, I think we also have to look at some of these smaller jobs and contracts. What is, a reasonable amount of insurance to carry? So really, at this point, it's just a business decision. We did have a response. I don't know if Tyler has that number with him, but it was probably another. Was it 11,000 a year?
It was
11 to 12. Another
11, 12, and 13,000 for the extension. So that was the additional cost in order to provide that.
It would be
additional level of
a total of 114,000 for the 3 years rather than the 77.
Yeah. Got it.
This is a contract to bring in the municipal solid waste and recycling from the Thimble Islands to the shore. It runs from May to beginning of October.
Any other questions from the board? What's our thought? Somebody want to move this?
Move the approval.
Moved by Harry.
I'll second.
Second by Jeff. Additional discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Next is item number 10, pursuant to Section 42-1 of the Code of the Town of Branford, the Police Department requests the Board of Finance review and favorable opinion for the proposed 5-year contract with Axon for new body camera, data cloud storage, and TASER 10 hardware totaling $700,586. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, everyone. Let me just give you a quick background on this. So by Connecticut state law, and actually we were one of the first early adopters of body cameras. So every officer who is out on patrol and would have contact with the public has to have a body camera, as well as we have to have in-car cameras. We settled the in-car camera contract a while back. We're up for renewal on our Axon on-body camera contract. As you know, the technology, AI has come a long way. They do have a very strong AI bundle. We've been working on this contract for the past 5 months. And we were looking at that AI. We tested and evaluated some of it, and kind of believe it or not, what you have in front of you is a very bare bones contract. We chose to kind of stay away from it for a little bit and see where the next year or two goes with some judicial oversight and maybe some restrictions. So we initially thought we would be over $1 million, $1.5 million possibly. This contract comes in over 5 years at $700,000 roughly. What that encompasses, again, as you have in front of you, is the actual hardware, the cloud storage. We generate thousands and thousands of videos. There's a lot of video management, redaction, FOI built into these suites. One of the newer things that we did include in this bundle is a situational awareness tool where we actually can now hit a button and see what the officer is seeing in real time. So our new dispatch center, when we're back over on Laurel Street, will have a situational awareness wall, i.e. some departments call it a crime center. I would rather call it situational awareness. But we will have the ability to zoom in and see the officers as they're on calls. We have that with our cars right now. Also in there is the hardware in the bundle. Taser 10 is a less lethal device that we have to have for our use of force continuum and dealing with less than compliant subjects. So it's 5 years. The page 2 has the breakdown, but we did come in a lot lower than we anticipated. We shied away from some of the newer technology. We're just not comfortable yet with it.
And so we budgeted for this in our annual budget.
Yeah, Jim had set up an account. This actually comes under
a lease agreement?
It comes out of IT.
IT.
And Scott was not here as we started this process.
So we budgeted the $129,000.
Yeah, basically, we started looking at this probably back in January. And when we were looking at some changes to make in the budget, at our February meeting, when we had those 12 pages of items, one of the things that we did is we were taking $475,000 out of fund balance, so that, in addition to future contributions, would be sufficient to make these payments. And I think, Chief, at the time we were looking at closer to $1 million. So the $700,000 and change actually is actually a good thing for us. But this was something that the Chief had talked to us about. Going into, because one of the things that we asked at the department head meetings, knowing that we were going into a revaluation year, was for the departments that were going to have some changes in their capital to let us know ahead of time so we could try to make some provisions in advance of the budget process. And so this was one of those items. And so it was like $475,000 from fund balance. Right. We set up a technology sinking fund, and then other contributions will go into that to meet the projected cash flows.
Thanks, Chip.
Yep.
And this isn't going away. This type of contract, whether it's with a different vendor, they happen to have most of the market share.
Yeah.
But we're going to be in this pretty much forever in law enforcement, and it only grows. And I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot more with the AI.
Thanks, Chief. Questions, board members, on this request for positive review?
I'll move it, Joe.
Moved by Jeff, second by Deborah, or
Yeah,
Pam?
it was Pam.
Pam, sorry, Pam.
Sorry.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Good night now.
Chief. Okay, next is number 11, to consider a request from the Finance Director to recommend that the Board of Finance appoint the accounting firm of Clifton Larson Allen LLP to perform the annual audit for fiscal year June 30th, 2025 at the cost of $92,400. Jim has sent us pertinent information. Jim, you want to expand on this?
Sure. I know the board is aware of this, but for the folks who are watching from home, in towns that have a Board of Finance, state statutes, which governs how municipalities appoint auditors, assign that appointing authority to the Board of Finance. In some towns, it might be the council, for example. And our code, which talks about some of our purchasing requirements, has a $75,000 exemption for a couple of services, one of them being audit services. And unfortunately, our audit services have not been under that amount since probably back to 22. This is an area of cost that has gone up somewhat significantly over the last 3 years. Back in 23, it was under $81,000. There was a big jump in 24 to just under $90,000. And this jump here, the 92 and change, is probably only about a 3.6% increase. So what was required before the Board of Finance could appoint CLA as auditors is to seek a waiver from the Board of Selectmen, which we had done a couple weeks ago. And so again, they approved the waiver. Then we come to the Board of Finance to seek the appointment. Once the appointment is made, then I actually file a report with OPM, because we're required by OPM to inform them who we're designating as our auditors.
Thanks, Jim. And Vanessa will be doing the audit again this year? Or is she...
Vanessa is doing it for the 24. The firm has a mandatory retirement age. Hard to believe, it's 60. So there is a new partner who will be introduced to. I've actually met him at conferences, but his name is David Flint, and he'll be the managing partner. My understanding is, however, that the sort of the next level of people, and those are primarily the folks that we deal with most of the time. Whether it's gentleman Mike Popham, who's been working on the town for a number of years. This gentleman Alex, who's worked with us for 3 or 4 years, he's kind of like the working foreman. And then there's other folks that, some of them are new and some of them have some familiarity with us. So I think that was one of the considerations always. I know I was asked during the budget presentation, I believe it was the RTM, right, where about the audit environment, because in the past I reported that the audit environment is very difficult in terms of trying to get municipal audit firms. There's not as many firms that do that. And again, it's somewhat anecdotal, but a number of my colleagues that I talk to regularly have still had difficulty in getting firms to bid. A neighboring town sent out 6 proposals. I got 2 bids, and one of them was a current provider. And that's a town smaller than us, but in cities that are bigger, that are considerably larger than us, they still have the same type of issue. So it seems like there's more than enough business for the audit firms, and so they're less likely to take on new clients, quite honestly. So.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Questions from Jim on this request for positive review again?
I'll move it, Joe.
I'll second.
Moved in second. Is discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, item number 12 is to hear an overview of the fiscal 25-26 budget highlights from the Finance Director and set the mill rate for fiscal 25-26. Before we get into that, I've just drafted a short memo to the board members, which I'll read. And then I'll turn it over to Jim. This is to the board, to the members of the Branford Board of Finance. In reviewing the action of the RTM on May 13th, 2025, of reducing the contingency budget by a net of $500,000, I had the following thoughts. This does not reduce expenditures, it defers them, essentially kicking the can down the road. 2, the primary budgetary role of the RTM is to approve expenditures, not to manage revenues, fund balance, or the tax levy. And by the way, the RTM did approve an increase in expenditures of just under 4.7%. 3, the RTM appears to be trying to instruct the Board of Finance as to how to carry out its budgetary responsibility. Maybe they should refrain from second-guessing the Board of Finance. Number 4, I believe the Governor Lamont recently noticed that when discussing the state's expenditure guardrails and spending cap, he said, we do not have a revenue issue, we have an expenditure challenge. I also have read several articles on towns, from the towns with their fiscal and budgetary challenges. Fortunately, Branford is in very good position. The Board of Finance took preemptive steps at its February and April 2025 meeting to mitigate fiscal 2026 expenses and reduce the impact of the revaluation process, including allocations from fund balance. And number 6, the Board of Finance has a fiscal oversight of all assets, liabilities, and fund balances of the town. In my opinion, the RTM action is irresponsible and appears to direct the Board of Finance as to how it should conduct its business. The Board of Finance, along with the First Selectman and the Finance Director, have always taken a strategic approach to management of revenues, operating expenditures, capital needs, fund balances, and debt service. And we know that Finance Director Jim Finch and the Finance Director and the Finance Department continually monitors our financial position, and we adjust our budgetary and planning models based on the operating and capital projections and other critical needs that come before us. In addition, I believe the Board of Finance and RTM are aware of likely future capital requests for the schools, for public works, for fire, and for wastewater treatment that will far exceed $100 million. Thus, it is critical that the town maintains its AAA rating, a substantial fund balance, and the Board of Finance is able to carry out its statutory and charter responsibilities without undue influence. In summary, the Board of Finance is well aware of the many variables involved in our budget process, including politics and other factors. And I trust that we, the Board of Finance, a historically nonpartisan appointed board, will continue to balance all the requests and considerations and advance our town as the well-run community that it is. Respectfully submitted, Joe Mooney, Chairman. Jim, I had also asked you to put together some thoughts with regards to not only the budget, but with regards to fund balance, and I'll let you address the rest of this agenda topic.
Are we talking about fund balance or the budget, or?
Whichever you choose to do first.
All right, well, I guess I'll follow up on fund balance. I had sent you a letter just talking about some of my thoughts to add a voice to the debate. And so I think we have to ask ourselves some questions.
Yeah.
One is, what is the fund balance? It's a town safety net. It's reserves set aside to cover operations, emergencies, pay-as-you-go capital projects. And why do we need it? Well, we have an uncertain political environment. I think that's probably an understatement. State and federal budgets are increasingly subject to political volatility, shifting priorities, tariffs, delayed budgets, or sudden policy changes, such as reduction in aid or changes in grant formulas, can quickly destabilize local finances. The fund balance allows us to absorb these impacts without cutting services or sacrificing long-term plans. It ensures we contain local control over our priorities, even when higher levels of government are unpredictable. Large capital needs. From roads and seawalls to sewer systems and public buildings, our infrastructure requires constant upkeep and periodic replacement. Delaying these investments only compounds the cost. Public safety and public works. Branford was recently informed that we need to find an alternative location to house our public works operation. And as the board may recall last year, we identified the need for a fire station to serve the eastern end of town, along with 8 additional firefighters. Our schools require investment. Our public schools are essentially community assets, but many are aging and need critical improvements. The Board of Ed is on the verge of adopting a facilities plan that will require the town to issue a significant amount of debt over the next 5 to 6 years. The fund balance can be used to provide liquidity and offset peaks in debt service. We are vulnerable to coastal risk. As a shoreline community, we're more exposed to storm surges, flooding, and erosion. These emergencies can create sudden, multi-million-dollar recovery needs. A sufficient balance, when coupled with the Coastal Resiliency Fund, allows us to act swiftly to protect residents, property, and infrastructure when disaster strikes. And as we also know, that FEMA funding is being reduced. It protects our bond rating and saves taxpayers money. Municipal bond ratings directly affect the interest rates we pay when borrowing. A top-tier rating of AAA is reserved for towns that demonstrate exceptional financial management, including the maintenance of strong reserves. In August 2023, the Government Finance Review noted that Moody's, that's the group that just downgraded the U.S. government, so you might have seen them in the paper over the weekend, requires a 35% reserve for AAA communities. While Branford is not rated by Moody's, this criterion is worth noting. And it supports fiscal stability and long-term planning. Whether it's an economic downturn, a reduction in state aid, municipalities need the ability to absorb shocks without cutting core services. A strong fund balance gives us flexibility and allows us to continue investing in long-term goals, not just short-term survival. It demonstrates financial stewardship. A well-managed fund balance is a sign of good governance. It shows our leaders are planning, prioritizing stability, and making decisions that protect both today's taxpayers and tomorrow's residents. Has the fund balance grown significantly in recent years? The short answer is yes. Higher interest rates, town clerk fees, and building permits, reflecting in part a post-pandemic surge in demand, have driven our tax revenues. Inflation also increased sales revenues, and as a result, the town's municipal revenue sharing receipts, coupled with cannabis revenues, played a role. Appropriations from fund balance for many capital items were not necessary, since ARPA dollars were available for a limited window of time, and thus they were used, whereas in the past, these items would be candidates for a fund balance appropriation. Branford was not unique in experiencing growth in reserves. And I sent an attached chart from Standard & Poor's that showed how nationally governments had significant growth in their reserves over the last few years. So the next question we ask ourselves is, will these trends continue in the future? Admittedly, Branford attempts to err on the conservative side when forecasting revenues and expenditures. As a result, we often anticipate offsetting some of the amount carried forward. I should underscore that the trends that increase the fund balance are the trends that increase the fund balance are likely to repeat themselves. So we're going to offset some of this, as we know, from our conservative budgeting, but will these trends repeat themselves going forward? And I'm not talking about fiscal 25, because as we know, we appropriated 16 EMTs, and they weren't hired at the beginning of the year, so there's some of those other things. But going forward, many of those things are less likely to be there, as I previously mentioned. As an example, we can all agree that interest rates are likely to be lower, not higher, as we look forward. Municipal revenue sharing is going away, except for a small grant to offset the pilot loss for Connecticut Hospice. And the BOE was permitted to carry over their unexpended funds, and the ARPA program is winding down. So what do we make of all this? It may be tempting to view fund balance reserves as idle or excess funds, but these funds are doing essential work, protecting our town from the unexpected and enabling us to plan with confidence. From protecting against storm damage to upgrading school buildings and public works facilities and securing the best interest rates possible, a strong fund balance empowers our town to act and not react.
Jim, that's very informative and in your true professional style. Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we move on to the mill rate and budgetary discussion?
Sure. So giving an update, I'll try to give sort of a high overview of some of the changes since the Board of Ed's recommended budget. So primarily, there were some changes that were made to various budgets, and many of them were, done in cooperation with the RTM, I should point out fairly. For example, there was a desire to set aside some money in the salary pool for many of the part-time employees, board clerks, et cetera. As this board knows, the budget included a 2.25% for those positions. The RTM felt that, given the state of the economy, given inflation, and given that many of those are not high-paying positions, that increasing it to 3% was more appropriate, and so that's reflected in that change. That money's put in a salary pool for human resources to distribute, because the mechanics of trying to do that on short notice and on the floor of the RTM would have its own challenges. So you may recall the tax collector had a capital request for making some changes to the tax office. I believe some of the changes centered around ADA and potential security issues. $15,000 would add to the collector's consulting, so that some of the soft costs to look at that could potentially be hired. The other item relates very much to what we heard tonight from the library director. She had mentioned that when they went from a two-house IT department to a one-house IT department through Lion, that the communications invoices fell through the cracks because they were going to the IT department and not to the library. So this $2,000 reflects that. And so many of these items, the $45,235 was sort of the net offset. So in other words, we reduced contingency by $45,235, and $45,235 went to those other items. So those were the various things that were presented by the committees. On the floor of the RTM, it was referred to earlier tonight, the contingency account was reduced by $500,000. This was, and I'll try to represent fairly because I don't want to put words in people's mouth. My understanding was that this was something that the RTM felt was a way to one, reduce the tax requirements, reduce our tax levy requirements. You may recall that the budget that the Board of Finance passed was a 2.13% increase in the levy. This change basically puts us about a 1.7% increase in the levy. So reducing our tax requirements through the levy was part of it. And the other, that any items that would have required contingency dollars, that is over the $509,000 that was ultimately approved, would also then have to be appropriated out of fund balance. This was deemed a step in the right direction, which I think, and that's part of the debate, right? Is this a step in the right direction, or should we pause in light of all the things that we've just mentioned over the last 7 minutes? So that's part of the debate. So the RTM side of the debate was that, given the revaluation year, in addition to the steps we took in February, in addition to the reductions that the Board of Finance made, that they wanted to go a step further through the $500,000 on the expenditure side, and so that's what drove or provided the philosophical underpinnings for that decision, and it was ultimately approved.
Okay, so
if you take that reduction, like I said, the levy is reduced, and the mill rate will then be reduced to 21.40.
So the 2140, Jim, is that's reflected on that page 1 of your the budget summary?
Yes.
This one here. And we also chose not to, the Board of Finance is choosing, or may not choose to change any other revenue items, nor change the fund balance other than accept the reduction, actually to leave the fund balance as it is and to accept the expenditure reduction. Correct. So that would bring you to 2140. Okay. Are there questions or comments from the board members to Jim about this, about what occurred and why?
Sure, make a motion to approve and then discuss it.
Sure, if you like. Yeah.
So, Joe, I'd make a motion to approve the mill rate for the 25-26 budget at 21.40.
Okay. Jeff's made a motion for 21.4.
Second.
Seconded by Harry. Open for discussion. As I mentioned, we're not, we see what the RTM did. We have our thoughts about that. I've expressed my opinion. The board does have the power to adjust revenues and to adjust the contribution fund balance. We know that that is a possibility, but right now 2140 is the net amount that I'm okay with, but I think I'd like to hear from other board members as to what they may think, if anyone so chooses.
I will just briefly say that I'm the newest board member, so I'm the least experienced with all of this, but I come from many, many, many years on the Sewer Commission, and I know that on that commission for the plant, we've been looking at a lot of issues with coastal resiliency. We've been looking at a lot of changes that are going to be necessary, a lot of adaptation, and I can just imagine that continues to flow through every other department in this town, and that the preparation that our town needs in order to face those changes that I don't think are if they're coming, when they come, are going to get a lot less help from anybody outside our town, given the federal situation that we see now, sadly. And I'm concerned. I wish the contingency had not been reduced. I think that it's prudent to have savings ready in order to be able to face those things. You know, I think about storms. I live in Pawson Park, and I remember when we lost Linden Avenue. And there was a lot of discussion of who was going to pick up the tab to fix Linden Avenue. And I'm grateful that we have a town that's in the position to be able to deal with those situations and didn't leave Linden Avenue as our only way in and out, in jeopardy. That's all I've got to say.
Thanks, Yvette. Anybody else?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Harry.
First, thank you for the comments. They've been accepted, I think, by the members of this board. And the thing that concerned me all week, and I've had discussions with the chairman, discussions with the finance director, is that this board has and will continue as really almost a non-political board. We don't sit here and have a discussion that we're a Republican, you're a Democrat. Our chairman is a Democrat. Yes, I'm a Republican.
You know that?
But we work every day, and we don't discuss that. We discuss what's in the best interest to our stakeholders, our shareholders if we were a public company, and that's our taxpayers. And the way this situation came, in my personal estimate, was somewhat of an insult. And that's how I felt. And I don't know how my two associates here have anything to say, or I know I spoke to Deborah, But Deborah, you may want to add or subtract.
Sure. I certainly support and agree with everything that Joe and Jim said. And I have to say that I'm very disappointed in the way that this all happened, because it was forced on us as a political issue when it shouldn't be a political issue. It needs to be an issue that focuses only on what's important and what is for the betterment and support of the people of Branford. And you forced us into a political issue, and it should have been done so.
Thanks, Deborah. And Harry. Anybody else?
I support all the thoughts here. I've been a lifelong resident of Branford, and I too live in Possum Park and drive along Linden Avenue, and I'm waiting for one big storm to come to wash it out, and that could deplete all of the good work that this town finance department has done to get us into a position of just fiscal responsibility to be able to support us going forward with whatever. So whatever state, federal government, restrictions happen, we are in a position in Branford to keep, our taxpayers at, top of mind and protect them going forward. So it's very disappointing.
Thanks, Pam. Jeff?
Joe, if I may. So I agree with all the comments tonight, and I thought as a board we delivered a good budget to the RTM to pull together and set the mill rate. It is a little bit insulting of what they did, and I do agree that it's a little bit politically motivated, but it's been done. We voted on it. We'll manage as we move forward, and I do agree with Harry's comments that this board does work closely together in making the best decisions for the town and the taxpayers.
Thanks. And at the end of the day, the fact is that we're not changing a revenue item, we're not adjusting fund balance. So, which we could do. We could do tonight. We could move fund balance and take $500,000 out of the allocation. That bill rate would then be $21.49, which is what was sent to the RTM. So, but we're not doing that. We're saying, listen, we're just going to let the dust settle. Hopefully the boards, the RTM and the Board of Finance can work well together in the future, because that's my goal, and I'm sure is the goal of the members of the RTM. And I think so we're taking the high road, but we're also expressing what we believe is correct thought process, as well as what our responsibilities are. So with that, is there any other discussion on 21.40 for the mill rate? If not, I think it was moved. Moved and seconded.
Okay.
And this is all part of the discussion piece. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All in favor. Thank you. Before we finish off tonight, I just wanted to thank Jamie and Jim and the finance department, and all the boards and commissions, including the RTM and our board, for all the work that's been done on this budget. And we're in really good shape, and we just wanted that to continue. But I'd also just like to point out to thank Jim, and your expertise and contribution has been invaluable, and your level of professionalism is just outstanding. Jamie, you got something you want to say?
Well, here's to plain speaking, clear understanding, right? Great meeting. Actually, I do, Joe. If you just, I want to thank the board for tonight, and once again putting forward and setting a mill rate that is sensitive to the taxpayer, while we have a budget that meets our core responsibilities and invests in our future of this community. As many of you may know, this is my last budget, and this is not only my 12th budget, but really 12 years when we reflect back as first selectman and what this town has accomplished in that 12-year period. I feel, the job of the first selectman is really to set and carry out a vision for the town. And I think when I look back, and not to start naming them, because whenever I do, I always think and there's more. There is so much more that we did, just not only in buildings, infrastructure improvements, but also programs and services that we provide. But really, I just want to thank this board and Jim and the finance department. That was only possible what we have accomplished over these past 12 years because of the commitment to financial stewardship of this board, your strategic planning, your reassurance to the community, in particular the taxpayer, that we can improve our community. We can elevate the level of service in our community by while being sensitive to the impact, the financial impact. So where, I look back on the 12 years and there's so much I'm be proud of what we have accomplished as a town. But tonight, I want to thank the Board of Finance and the Finance Department for their service and their dedication, the commitment of the town of Branford. I first came on 12 years ago, and the makeup of this board, as pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, has changed over that time. I know, Evie, you just mentioned that you were the newest member here, right? But, I think what exists from everybody that has sat on this table over these past 12 years and even prior, there's a culture that we have here in Branford of financial responsibility, and not only taking pride in that, but understanding the importance of that, why it is important to be good stewards of the public dollars and therefore the public trust. So I thank each and every one of you. I do just want to take a moment to really acknowledge Joe Mooney and Jim Finch. Over the past 12 years, they have provided guidance and insight and really mentorship to me personally. So I want to thank you both. I think it's been a great run. But I still have a few months left. So not a lame duck. No, but I want to thank you. I really do. And I can tell, I just want to, anytime we had a meeting, whenever there was something big before us, whether it was, this past year, what we've done with public safety, and, going back to the beginning, the investments not only in this building to meet the seniors' needs, but also the needs of the school district. It was always through what is the public purpose for this, and we have to be mindful of the taxpayers, those who are funding it. Every discussion centered on how can we address this. So once again, just thank you to both of you.
Thanks. Jim, do you got to use a few words?
Yes. Just want to let folks know that I had sent a letter to the Board of Finance probably about an hour and a half ago. It's not customary for me to talk about what's going on in my personal life, but probably the last exception was when I talked about fund balance classifications and my dating life after college. But that aside, typically I don't actually talk too much about that. I never thought I would be at a meeting where I would here's the plain speaking and clear understanding, which is for those movie aficionados and fans of film noir, that goes back to Sidney Greenstreet in his conversation with Humphrey Bogart in The Maltese Falcon. So if that's one of the movies you like, go back to that and you'll find that that's part of the dialogue. So the last couple months for me have been kind of interesting, and some good things and some challenging things. On a good side, basically I was recognized for service to the profession by the Connecticut Government Finance Officers Association, and I was also asked to serve on a panel at the National GFOA conference in Washington, D.C. this summer, and some of the things I'll be talking about will be some of the work we did with the administration, the Board of Finance, and the RTM, and setting up the Coastal Resiliency Fund. And then I'm also being asked to speak in Connecticut at a Connecticut Public Pension Forum on our approach to bringing back the defined benefit pension plan for the police. So a lot of the things that we did here are sort of, taking national, are gaining some traction and putting Branford on the map. Some challenging things, and I don't want to give anybody the wrong impression. I'm not dying or anything like that, so I don't want to give people that impression. But I've had some recent health news that, was not as good as I would have liked. And, it makes you sort of reassess where you're at in life, where you want to spend your time. Like I said, I could easily live to 100, but my probabilities have changed a little bit. And so looking at that and, having been here for, Jamie was talking about 12 years, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the 12 years working with you, Jamie, and Lisa, and the 20-something years I've worked with Catherine and Joe. You go back to the start, so that was back to 1998. So this is my 27th budget year with the town of Branford, but I'm not going to be here for the 28th year. And so, I'm not leaving tomorrow. I do plan to stick around to support a transition, to support Catherine, and to support the next administration for a couple months. And then I plan to, and then I'll be turning 64. I'll be 64 by then, later this year, and then I plan to retire. So, like I said, I'm not retiring tonight, but I did feel it was appropriate to give the town time to sort of work on that transition. Also, we have some projects still to complete. We got to complete the 24 audit, potentially start the 25. Mike Lepore mentioned the pension valuation in the fall, for example, and folks may remember the pension administration system that was approved. So we have done a lot of great things in Branford, and it's been all levels of government, whether it's the selectmen, whether it's the Board of Finance, and the RTM. I mean, a lot of these things that I mentioned, whether it's the Coastal Resiliency Fund, whether it's changing the pension fund, different things that are Branford on the map, approving bond authorizations to do early refundings of clean water funds until the state realized that we had them, and then they sort of limited them after that. So again, I want to thank everyone here for their support and collaboration over the years, and I just want to emphasize I'm not going anywhere tonight. I plan to be around for some time, but I just don't envision myself being here at the start of next year's budget process.
Well, Jim, you've done a wonderful job for us. We're sad to see you go, but best of luck. Okay, so with no other business to come before the board, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move it.
Moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org. You're watching BCTV.